That's right, community. It's time for AppSec Now, a DevCentral podcast focused on the latest threats and happenings in the application security world. We'll be featuring custom curated content from F5's Security Incident Response Team and relevant data from F5 Labs to keep you up to date on the absolute latest in AppSec now. All right, welcome community. So happy to see you. It's a Monday, and that means it's time for AppSec Now. This week I've got with me David Warburton, Chase Abbott, and Megazone. How you guys doing today?
Well, good.
Doing good.
All right, and also to mention, Kyle Fox is responsible for curating the news this week, so thank you very much, Mr. Fox. We are going to hopefully do you some justice and as we chat about these things. So kind of really jumping right into things, the first thing that was discussed was Google is buying Wiz for $32 million. That seems like a lot to pay for this kind of technology that, honestly, I sort of thought Google already had this capability. I didn't realize that they would want to go out and kind of buy something. What do you guys think that this does for their kind of security posture? Does this kind of push them forward as more of a player, or what does this add? Don't everyone go at once.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, Wiz is one of the fastest growing tech firms ever. Like their revenue has been growing leaps and bounds. I imagine Google isn't going to in-house this whole thing. I mean, otherwise, why buy them? This is, I think they're going to remain a player in the space in general, just like Wiz has been. I think they basically saw a lot of future revenue there. They obviously they wanted them quite badly. They made a very high bid and got declined and came back with a much higher bid. So, almost half again as much.
Intriguing. So, I mean, beyond scanning, right? Like just cloud scanning, is there anything like crazy formidable that I'm kind of missing out of their repertoire? That's the only thing I really know them for. Sounds like that's it.
I'm wondering if Google is also buying the customer base at the same time.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't have big penetration with some of their security products. They did with a lot of others, but maybe Wiz is that over the threshold for them that needs to get their momentum for a full security posture.
Interesting. I hadn't really considered that. I figured like everyone would already be Google customers by some. So, well, I guess, companies. So that's
for full GCP stuff. I know a lot of people use them for a lot of backend data and storage, but Amazon still kind of owns the app market. So maybe this is more compelling for people looking to move off AWS or Azure native services.
interesting. That's now and
all corporate stuff, I think, at this point.
And for us, of course, scanning has become a big part of what we are doing day to day as well. It seems to be like I can recall when I was an SE, and I don't know if David, this was happening when you were still an SE as well, but we ended up developing partnerships with like White Hat, right? That was like a huge, at the time, that was like the AppSec cloud scanning utility. And it seems like there are more players in this thing now, and it just seems to be a bigger field.
Yeah, I think it really shows the kind of reliance that people are having on just kind of getting the code out there. And I mean, hopefully things are being done correctly. It's, belt and braces approach. Hopefully there's secure coding going into the actual applications that are being published out there. But I think an appreciation that just there's so many applications being developed so quickly, things are being changed, new libraries being brought in. You just can't sit still. You have to be constantly scanning, looking for your own problems before someone else does. And I think, that this kind of increased number of companies out there that are doing this kind of scanning really just speaks to how many people now rely on this kind of service to catch bugs really before the bad guys do.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm excited though, honestly. To me, it's nice because with the scanning, it does give people a much better posture in the long run. So I do like that. Next up, kind of in the news, and again, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. But Heathrow is closed for a day due to an
Yeah.
electrical substation fire. This brought up a lot of, for me, brought up a ton of nightmares about physical security problems in building data centers. I can remember this one data center I was building, the employer that I worked for just before coming over to F5. We were building a new data center for mail, right? And it was very secure environment. But I remember we had a problem in getting our certification. I can't remember which one it was, stock or one of the ISOs is only 15 million ISOs. But there was a train track that ran the backside of the building. And I remember the very last thing that kind of held us up was, boy, somebody could bring a train by with a whole bunch of C4 and potentially detonate your back wall, meaning there would be physical access to the data center. And holy cow, some of the things you have to think about. But really, I mean, this sort of proves it. Some of the things you really do have to think about.
I mean, us being in a earthquake zone, theoretically, when we think of redundancy, we're thinking plate tectonics. It's just what we think about. But I guess with Heathrow, you can't do that. It's physical infrastructure and what's available pipeline wise that they can attach to. This is probably just one of those antiquated things from it's been so long since they thought of that. How big was Heathrow when they initially plugged into those systems? And this wasn't their connection point. It was almost like the backhaul that everybody pulls into and just overlooked.
Well, it's not that it was overlooked. I think there's only so much you can do because there's not we don't have an option. If you're doing a data center, and I know I used to years ago, I worked for GT VPN, and one of the things we used to pitch is we had data centers on both coasts. We had backbone that ran across, so it's we can do geographic diversity, and you can do everything had multiple carrier backhaul in and out. So if one carrier went down,
because it's data, it's
right.
easy.
But you don't really have the choice of multiple electrical grid backhaul, right? So there is a grid, and there's the necessary generator capacity to keep an entire airport online is massive.
Mm-hmm.
You basically would need a small power plant, like a peaker plant dedicated to the airport on site or something. It's doable, yes. But I think probably they have to look at and say, what's the cost of doing that versus the risk, right? That's what it always comes down to. And this was, obviously it's never happened before. This is a once in a many years situation of a large substation going offline, and that kind of surprising they were able to get everything back up within a day. Honestly, considering the amount of damage that was done with the fire there. But yeah, it really shows also the extent and the interconnectedness of our networks, our physical networks. Heathrow, like the article says, one of it's the fifth largest, but it's also, I think it's the largest, maybe second largest hub in Europe.
The largest hub in Europe.
I think it's got to be the biggest.
Yeah. So when you take out the largest hub in Europe or take it offline for a day, physical traffic has more problems routing around. It's not like there's a lot of surplus airport capacity and all those connections, all those, everything. That's why, when we have those, storms in the U.S., a hurricane hits, a tornado hits, or blizzards hit, and an airport gets shut down for a day by weather, and it takes days or a week longer for the network to gel back to where it's supposed to be because nothing's where it's supposed to be after that. Yeah, it gives an example of real world impacts when things go wrong. And I don't know what they'll do after the fact. Of course, when this happened, everyone was, we got to do something when this never happens again. But I think when they start analyzing the costs, we'll see if they build a new power plant, right? Is it worth the justification of putting you could put, say, a gas-fired peaker plant on site that you have as your backup
little
generator.
baby breeder reactors just all over the place.
Yeah. So there are things technologically, you can solve it, but it's the economic question of is it something that's worth spending that money on? When Heathrow's looking at building another runway, right? All these other expensive projects they have. They have all these expensive projects they're looking at doing. That is it worth diverting your budget to building a backup power plant in case the substation burns again?
And I think their backup power situation is appropriate based off a risk factor. They have enough power to keep people safe,
Yeah.
and they have enough power to keep basic life support of that place running. You're not going to be able to power the whole place at any economical value.
Yeah, and that's because you can keep the air traffic control going, so you're suddenly not without air traffic control. But to keep an airport going, all the security scanners have to be working. You have to have all the stuff for all the humans passing through that hub has to be working for it to be an effective airport.
I need to keep those Wagamama grills rolling, so I can have my noodles.
Keep the bathrooms working, right? Yeah. Keep the lights on. Keep it's all the things. So you can't have millions of people passing through a place without any amenities.
I think it was really telling, though, with the current political, climate that we're in, just how many people assumed it was some kind of terror attack or something, nefarious and deliberate when it first happened.
Were you delayed at all? Were you trying to fly by chance, David?
No, I was good. I was safe and sound at home as usual. So that's I wasn't really affected. But again, being the position I'm in, having people in the media reach out immediately, kind of just assuming with everything going on that it was maybe a Russian-backed kind of physical attack or maybe even a cyber attack. That was just the number one assumption. And you have to wonder how many disaster recovery plans now just kind of have now prioritized the cybersecurity risk, possibly even it could be said potentially, disproportionately outside of the kind of physical side of security.
And we have seen that. There were in the U.S. Several years ago, pre-COVID, I'm pretty sure it was now, there was the instance of some yahoos running around shooting up substations.
Do you remember that?
So,
high-class VIP.
Now, this was a much larger substation than these, but these were, rural substations where they were going out, putting a few rounds into transformers and taking them offline. And the problem is that these aren't things you go to Temu and get a new one and drop it in the next day. You don't get overnight shipping on a transformer. So, it can be years of lead time for the larger ones to have new transformers built. So, yeah, there is that real world risk. And that's why people who have to worry about these professionals lose sleep is if someone really wanted to do a physical attack on a bunch of substations, that would be a bad thing.
Please, nobody buy their transformers from Temu.
all I was thinking was like the Temu substation comes with like a free pair of booty shorts for sure. Absolutely. And it's funny. I was thinking, MZ, when you were talking about the storms that we've had in this country. Of course, that's always a challenge. And what it really made me think of was thank God for FEMA. So moving on, let's talk about the next article we had was 23andMe is going bankrupt. So that is tough. The guidance that we had from the CERT was to delete your data, right? And there was a link provided by the Attorney General from California who urged for this, hey, go ahead and do this, and gave step-by-step instructions. So if you're listening to this and you are concerned about your DNA being sold, to who knows without your consent, go ahead and, try and follow this. I haven't done it yet because I did not sell my DNA to anyone. I'm one of those people that felt uncomfortable and still feel uncomfortable giving the only thing of mine that is like private, truly private to anyone else. So that's just my thinking. So I'd love to know if anyone's been through this, and if you're listening, because I already verified none of the four of us have been through this process yet, unless one of you guys lied to me. I
am a user. I have not deleted my data. At this point, I actually don't really care. So I don't know if I'm going to, but if there's a DNA test out there, I probably used it. So because I'm a curious bugger and I'm adopted, so I actually managed to find a biological family that way. But
I found a sister.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm aware of it, and
that's a good use case. I didn't think of that one.
What's that?
Yeah, my mom had used one of these services, and I get on her case all the time for cybersecurity. But I'm like, if my sister and I can't get insurance in the next 20 years because you decided to drop this beauty, thanks. But yeah, adoption lookup is an actual valid use case. My thing is like, if it's that cheap, you're the product. I do not trust the thing these people do with this data. I don't believe they honor their end user agreements that they use. I mean, that's valuable information for a lot of larger customers. And we already know through how many litigations over the years that it's easier to say I'm sorry and pay out a small couple million, the weakest fees ever.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've seen fines, and even things like GDPR with the kind of teeth that it's got, and even some more recent legislation that's come out, potentially threatening 4 to 8% of global revenue. How, when that actually comes to be implemented and enforced by local law enforcement legislators, it's very rarely that big number. So to your point, Chase, we can have these kind of these laws with these big teeth, but actually the fines typically are not that significant and really bother these kind of companies.
Yeah, the EU I've seen at least has had a little bit of teeth with some of their fines, but the US it's almost a challenge.
Yeah, the laws in the US are pretty weak. I mean, we really don't have much in the way of data protection here.
So, but I don't know the success rate of the ability to delete your data if it's easy for people to do it. I know that the other one, Ancestry, had some methodologies. I don't know if that was very easy either. I've told people to delete their data there as well since they were sold off.
Call me skeptical. I just have this huge problem with trust. I mean, if I were to go and request my data to be deleted with any organization, not just 23andMe, how do you know there isn't a backup or a backup of a backup?
Right.
If it's in cloud environment that gets forgotten about or something or some dev, it's just, you have to put an awful lot of trust into these organizations.
We'll delete your data, but the data we already sold isn't going to get deleted.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have that weird thing. I think about the X-Files episode where Dana Scully finds her DNA in that deep cave storage. Right. Literally, that pops in my head every time I see one of these websites. I'm not paranoid, but I still think it's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's you said backups. Because the thing is, companies for integrity, usually have disaster recovery. They'll have backups of stuff off at Iron Mountain, and we say delete my data. Yeah, they're going to delete it from anything live, but is it going to be who's going to Iron Mountain and finding that tape? And
funny enough, corporations have those agreements with their large customers. Like when I was part of the contract with a couple big banks for F5, because I was on the data back end, we had to prove the ability to go and find the data that they were a part of and have the ability to grab those tapes, pull them back and delete it within 24 hours. Like that was part of our contract with that bank. It was nuts, but we actually could prove it. End user agreements do not have that provision. No. So once your data is backed up or mirrored or third-partied out in analysis, whatever, it is not going to get deleted.
Yeah, and I can understand, because it's one thing when you have, like you said, like large banks, I'm sure there was a financial tie to that ability to delete it in 24 hours. I'm sure 23andMe would offer that to you too for the same price.
Right. Good point.
If you as an end user wants your data deleted in 24 hours, you can pay a few $1 million for someone to learn how to find a tape. So yeah, there's lots of data out there. I mean, it's just one example. I mean, how many different systems in cloud? Everything's cloud now, right? Everything's everybody. For that matter, like all your consumer data, what you've downloaded from Amazon, what you've watched on Netflix, all these things are out there. All these things are used to build profiles of you, and that's the truth of the modern world. Is pretty much anything you do online, someone's building a profile of you.
Which is why I have many identities depending on what I'm doing.
Well, what I got out of this one is that anyone looking to clone Megazone knows where to get that data.
That's right.
So we can actually maybe
make
do the world. Yeah, we could do some good for the world. Moving on, I think we've got a contribution from Labs this week. David, I think you were going to talk to us a little bit about the 2025 Advanced Persistent Bots report. So
yeah,
good.
Thanks, Aubrey.
You got
Thank
it.
you.
Take it away.
I'm really glad that we can share this. It's been a huge piece of work that's been going on for a number of months now, since the end of last year. So just being released. I'm going to take you through a few of the kind of major findings, a few of the things to just kind of whet your appetite and then point you in the right direction to figure out where you can go and get the rest. But as Aubrey said, it's a brand new report published last Friday. We have a digital copy online, obviously on our website, and a PDF copy coming soon for all those that want to kind of print it out at home or email it around. But it's a huge piece of work, as I said. So we've analyzed over 207 billion transactions sent to customers of F5 Distributed Cloud. And that we don't usually kind of mess around with customer kind of data from F5 labs. We typically look at things outside of F5. But this has been a really interesting look into how bots change and what's really unique about this report, because there are a number of automated and kind of bot reports out there from different vendors, from different providers. What we're focusing on, as the name suggests, are those advanced and persistent bots. And what I mean by that is the landscape changes dramatically when you enable bot control or bot mitigation. In many cases, those bot operators, people using bots to conduct different kind of attacks or trawl your website for data, will give up and they'll go onto a weaker target. In many cases, they will retool. If what they consider that you have is valuable enough, they'll spend time tweaking their bots, tweaking their tools to try and mitigate, or to try and mitigate the mitigation, to basically try and get around those kind of bot controls. And so when we look at the kind of numbers on the web, they seem on face value like, maybe it's not that big a deal. So what we find of those 207 billion transactions targeting web and mobile APIs. And we say mobile APIs because typically, if there is a mobile app which is essentially just using WebView, like a web browser wrapper for the application, we classify that as a web application. So when we talk about mobile applications, they are true kind of API calls come from a proper kind of first-party mobile app making API calls to the backend. So we found, crossing all organizations, all kind of industries, across mobile and web, 10.2% of every single transaction was automated. Now, that again may not set the world on fire. That doesn't sound particularly huge, but consider the fact that this is traffic that has been targeted on going to applications for customers that have had these bot controls in place for months, or in many cases years and years and years. So this traffic is obviously being blocked by the F5 kind of bot control system that's in place to prevent that traffic going through the back end. But of all the traffic, 4.8% was definitively malicious, because there are many cases in which bots and automation are benign and genuine traffic. We have financial aggregators, we have business-to-business applications in which bots, if you can call it that, non-human users essentially, are designed to, and they need to get through to backend applications, either to an API or to a web interface. So there are some of these bots are genuine, but 4.8%, almost 5% of every single transaction was from an unwanted bot. Now, I mentioned the fact that things change dramatically when you put bot controls in place. And the graphic I'm showing on the screen now, I'll describe it for any of you that's listening and can't see the web stream at the moment, is really, really telling. What you're seeing here is a graph in which we calculate the proportion of bots traffic targeting what we call an authentication flow. That's predominantly login pages, but it could be change password pages, really anything to manage your account. Really, this is kind of very security specific endpoint or URL that bots are targeting. And so on the x-axis, we've got 0. We've got days for mitigation, 0 being when bot controls or mitigations actually switched on for any given customer. And what we see is before mitigation, we have anything up to 20 to 40% of all traffic hitting authentication flows comes from a bot or some kind of authenticated kind of mechanism. When we get to 0, bot mitigation, bot controls are put in place for these customers, and the traffic drops significantly. Now, it doesn't go away. Because typically most bot operators, will go, but some persists, and again, as I mentioned, will retool. But that traffic from bots and automation hitting credential and authentication flows drops significantly to around about the 5% kind of mark. And so again, it's a really good reminder that this report really focuses on the bots that persist, those that don't give up, they don't go away. They value your customers' information, your company's information in your application, and they keep trying to target it. So the report goes into lots and lots of details in terms of the industries most hit, the flows or the endpoints most targeted, and what that really kind of means. We'll look at the sophistication of those bots, and I'll share a little bit more about those in a second. What you can see on screen at the moment that I'm showing is the top targeted industries. We found that hospitality had a major kind of bot issue across all customers we had in the hospitality space. Almost 45% of traffic hitting hospitality web endpoints was automated from bots. Things vary drastically though. If we look to mobile APIs, we find that entertainment is one of the most targeted aspects. And what's really interesting to consider as well, thinking about web and mobile APIs, is how bots, operators and bot users kind of persist once mitigation is put in place. We find that when you put bot controls in place, mobile API traffic can fall dramatically from bots, whereas it can persist and in some cases even increase against the web endpoints. And the reason for that is APIs are generally very easy to code against. APIs are generally well documented on the web. There are open specs for any given API typically, and it's very trivial to code an application that queries an API cleanly. When it comes to the web, because the web content is, necessarily contains formatting information like CSS and images, it's much more complex to kind of create bots that understand what the page looks like, and to find ways in which they can pull the information out that they want through the web interface. So bot operators that put time and effort and money into creating bots that target websites are far less willing to just give up and go away once bot controls are put in place. So you will find, if you look at the report, that for some industries, bot traffic actually goes up, like for web endpoints and flows, when bot controls are put in place. Now, that's not to be confused with bots that actually get through to the application or origin servers. Bot traffic is stopped, but it's really fascinating to see how bot operators, when they come into contact with bot controls and security measures, they actually, the increase in traffic is just purely because they're trying to retool and trying to get past, trying to get through those mitigations. And that huge increase in traffic is just kind of skewing the numbers for the year because they send so many more requests to test their bots against these new controls. We dive into and we compare industries against flows and find out, how one compares against the other. You'll find we've got a heat map also showing on the screen at the moment, and some industries, suffer far worse in some areas than others. It will come as no surprise. E-commerce really suffers with the add to cart flow, which again will come as no surprise to anyone that follows. Anyone that wants a Taylor Swift ticket or PlayStation 5 or maybe a new GPU. Those are the bots. When people talk about those kind of bots that are stealing or grabbing and snapping up all those products and tickets, that's the flow. It's the add to cart flow that these bots are kind of targeting. So again, e-commerce is an obvious one. But what you'll see is the login flow is pretty much the only flow that we target that every single industry has an issue with. Because essentially these are the bots, the automation kind of engines that are trying to perform credential stuffing or account takeover attacks. I'm showing on screen at the moment some of those industries that are worst hit. Technology had a major issue, we find, in all the traffic we analysed, which was, by the way, from end of 2023 to end of 2024. So technology, 34% almost of all kind of authentication or bot traffic all authentication traffic came from bots. Again, that changes quite a bit if you look at different industries and look at mobile APIs. We find the entertainment and e-commerce industries had a major issue there against their mobile API endpoints. Both those industries had about 24 to 25% of all traffic coming from bots, trying to perform credential stuffing or account takeover attacks, as they know. The report also dives into a really fascinating topic that we've got some ongoing research happening at F5 and F5 Labs, and that is the world of residential IP proxies. I'm not sure if any of our listeners are familiar with those, but one of the major defenses against bots is to perform some kind of IP check. So it could be looking from the country that IP traffic originates from. It could be looking at an IP reputation database. To look how, whether this IP has been known to be part of, say, a botnet or spreading malware or being used by bots. So getting a clean and trusted IP is really on a high priority for kind of bot operators. They want to make sure that it's another check that they can try and bypass when it comes to using their bots to attack or steal data from websites. So there's been a massive explosion of what we call residential IP proxies. Now, what happens in this situation is end users, it could be the likes of you and I on our devices at home, are either tricked or willingly install what we call proxyware. And this creates this huge kind of proxy network, which are comprised of home computers and home routers and devices that are sat on consumer IP blocks. So when it comes to network defenses and bots, mitigation controls that rely on IP-based traffic, one of the things you're going to look for is, does this IP address have a kind of high reputation? Well, if it's coming from a residential IP address and not from, say, a cloud service where bots can be run, the chances are that IP is going to have a much healthier network, healthier reputation. The other issue is there will actually be customers that come from those residential IPs. Let's say I were to install some proxyware on my device at home, and yes, I'm passing bot traffic through my device onto wherever its destination is, but I myself is still browsing the likes of e-commerce sites and retail sites trying to purchase something. So it really isn't possible for operators or bot control systems to block any IP that is seen to be having kind of bot traffic, because that'll also be blocking my genuine traffic when I actually go and try and purchase something. So it's a real challenge for website owners, application owners, to try and protect their sites from anything from scalpers, credential stuffing attacks, to intellectual property theft, or even layer 7 DDoS. It's an ongoing piece of research. We kind of dive into the report, but again, keep an eye on the F5 Labs website. We'll have far more information coming out about those soon. Trying to be useful as we do. We've got a few other pages that we've published, a few other articles we've published alongside this report. So I'm going to direct you to our website in a minute. That Merlin has gone and created a new article dubbed The Bot Pyramid of Pain. And this really is just an exploratory look at the types of controls you can put in place to try and mitigate these kind of bots. Things that you can try and code easily into the application, which generally are quite trivial for bot operators to mitigate, right the way through to the kind of top end, the behavioral type tests you can do, which are much, much more difficult to implement, but cause the most amount of pain for those bot operators. So hopefully lots of good information. We try and kind of get across the reason that people need to be so concerned with kind of bots. I think, many people see bots as being a kind of trivial issue, one that just causes somewhat frustration. Again, if you're trying to buy concert tickets, but hopefully try and get across the real damage that they can do. So if you want to read the whole reports, please go to the site. It's f5.com/labs/bots. You'll be able to see the report online. Again, we've got a PDF version coming soon, and all those supporting articles that give you much more kind of background into the bots and actually how you can start protecting against them.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's always good to take a look at things. And honestly, residential proxies, Malcolm has been saying it. We should probably do just like a deep dive on that one of these weeks too. It's such a huge problem. I myself was able to pick up a bunch of stuff on my home network somewhat recently, and just seeing exactly how much traffic ended up going to places that I didn't want it to go was phenomenal. So
yeah, it's huge.
Okay, well, I guess moving on, we have got the last piece on the news from Kyle was a piece on vibe coding. So I just happen to have a cybersecurity guy that some of the community knows named Steve Wilson on one of my other podcasts, which is called AI Friday. So I did want to just play a couple of interesting bits. There's 2 quick clips from that show with Steve Wilson. So bear with me here.
Professional software developers all use LLMs to write code. Period. Full stop. Done. Okay, let's get that out of the way. So most of the people making these memes have no idea what they're talking about. They're mostly security people who are trying to act like they know about software development when they don't know anything. And they're trying to get on their high horse and gatekeep things. And they're mostly, what they're making fun of, though, is younger people, or maybe people sort of crossing disciplines, who are able to develop custom software now with this assistance.
We are seeing, however, in the industry, quite a bit of insecure code getting pushed out into production from this. It may not be 100% of the time. I do think there's some validity to the complaints.
Yeah, the thing that jumped out to me when I did a little bit of research before this was that the code written by the LLMs will often break the project's code to fit a unit test rather than to fix the unit test when told to do so. And I think that's pretty telling of what can go wrong.
But by the way, one of the things I often say with this stuff is how much is that not like a human? How many software developers have went and made a refactor and all the tests broke, and what they did is I'm just chucking these tests. I'll get back to it later. That's never happened in the history of programming.
So it's funny. I did not think that Steve was going to come out so hard in favor of vibe coding as a place to start. So I know we all have some pretty strong feelings on that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to?
I want to say something on that Steve thing, though. The problem is with a person, they can go back and review what they did wrong and correct it. If somebody doesn't know how to program, they can only have the LLM generate the same problem again unless they know where it is. And vibe coding allows people to program that don't know how to find that problem.
No doubt.
I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's a bad thing wielded in experienced hands.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with most of what he said more, because the first of all, I know lots of people who are full-time software developers who outright do not use and do not trust AI. So the fact that his statement, they all use it, no, absolutely 100% factually incorrect. Do a lot of them use it? Yes, but there's also a big difference between, and it's not funny to me because that kind of a claim gets spread. I know a lot of full-time software developers who do not use AI. But even there's also a big difference between even using something like Copilot to help you around a problem and vibe coding. Like it's not, AI is not AI. Like using software to generate all your code for you is different from, I'm stuck trying to get a prototype done for a function, having AI assist you with that, and then using that as a basis to write your own code or take that. Vibe coding is a lot more of generate this for me and see if it works. You're relying a lot more heavily on AI to get things right, and you don't have to have as much knowledge of what you're doing to double check what it does.
So I think,
and also,
you just made a really good point. There's code assist with somebody who knows what they're doing, and then there's vibe coding. They are two distinctly different things.
Right. Yeah, and so you're saying, you can make a claim like, do a lot of the developers now use AI? Yes, but a lot of people use vibe coding is a lot farther, and it's putting a lot more trust into AI than Code Assist does. And then the thing about, should no human have done this? So that's like, the old, if your friends jumped off a bridge, like, are there bad coding practices out there with humans? Yes. We don't need to reinvent bad coding practices with AI. And that's, if a project actually allowed a human to break all their unit tests and deploy to production with that code, the program manager needs to be fired.
Yeah.
That should not be allowed. That's not secure coding. There are lots of places where that would not fly. So yeah, have humans done it? Has it ever happened in the history of coding? Of course it has. Is that a good thing? No.
the big core thing people always fail to remember is LLMs are trained on everything they can attach to.
Right.
That's good code. That's also really
bad code.
Poopy code. But then the best code is never going to get touched. The best code that nobody could quite understand because these PhDs over here wrote it with no comments. But if you remove it, the entire software package breaks. But a lot of these amazing repositories of wealth are not on GitHub, or they're on private GitHubs. They're never going to be indexed, trained in an LLM. Part 2 of this is royalty rights. What license was attached to that Git repository was pulled? You may inadvertently create vibe coding cool little widget. Secretly, you now owe somebody $1 million because your little vibe code got really popular. But the LLM is not going to be aware of that. So unless you have some amazing agentic vibe coder for you that can go and figure out what repository it pulled that little snippet from, check the license to make sure if it's allowed to use it, and then tell you, that doesn't exist quite yet. So it is a very dangerous practice, but I'll end my rant on vibe coding, though, is helping some people right now. So I have a lot of friends. I'm in Seattle. So I got a lot of government workers, researchers specifically, that their long tail jobs where they work on these research projects for a month, they now have to do their, what did I do this week? 5 things to validate their efficiency. So instead of doing their job, they're now taking 10% of their week and doing 5 little things to prove to the Doge administration that they're working. Vibe coding is helping them a lot because they're creating these little widgets to make little tasks easier. So think of it as like populating these adorable little cron jobs all over the world, just to create 5 bullet points for their management chain.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it doesn't have a place, and it will probably get better. But the idea of making a large commercial project, and like I said, we have seen problems. And one of the problems with the more code you generate with AI, the larger your chance of violating a license or GPLing your project because you managed to include a big chunk of GPL code. Congratulations, you've contaminated your code base.
Yep.
If you don't know where your code's coming from, and if you don't know enough, if the developer doesn't know enough to review that code, if it can't go through the regular unit tests, these are all problems that would not fly in a lot of commercial environments because you have to be able to account for licensing, you have to be able to account for security. And so if it's like, well, what does this code do? Well, it works, but I'm not sure the AI wrote it. So you definitely need to have that level of human understanding. At this point, AI is not to the point where I can have it generate something and trust it's licensed properly. It is security, secure code, best code practices. So yeah, I do have a lot of issues with using this kind of stuff in any kind of critical or commercial application.
Tell Steve he's in trouble.
Well, for me, I thought the one thing that I have a hard time with, I mean, on the one hand, you've got, I needed to know something, write a quick Python script. I don't know Python, like really, I just don't. It enabled me to get, something good enough to kind of, hey, okay, this is something that I suspect is good, but here's the thing, oversight, right? I'm not qualified to oversight, to oversee that code. So the one thing that I had to do, and I would tell anyone who's trying to use vibe coding as a success method, please make sure you share your code with somebody who does know what they're doing so that you can actually learn from the mistakes that the LLM will in fact generate, because they do. I mean, they're full of mistakes. My one piece of code that I generated via vibe coding ended up being just chock full of junk, but it did provide me an opportunity to actually go through with a friend who does know Python and who was able to say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. No one would ever do this, XYZ. So it is really, important. One other thing I will mention about that before, because we are coming up on time. One thing I will mention about that is we've had situations where supply chain attacks. Now this is really nutty. Supply chain attacks in the AI world are pretty intriguing. We've had situations where lots of different LLMs have, believe it or not, hallucinated the same package library. Okay. It's not a library that exists, but because there's specific verbiage out there in language and on the web, they hallucinate the same exact library. So we've had a couple of different bad actors that have gone out there and just
created the library.
Made that library. And okay, we'll make that library full of all kinds of really neat code that is meant to put you into a botnet and all that stuff.
That's a good thought. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
So check your code. Don't ever
check
trust
the code. Don't let Vibe learn for you.
Yeah, don't trust the vibe coding. Okay, any last thoughts, folks, before we kind of close up for yet another week?
Well, I'll be gone next week. I'll be at VulnCon.
That's a great thing. Next week, VulnCon. And there's still registration available?
For virtual attendance, yes. The physical is shut down. We hit our cap. So
congratulations.
We've been warning for a while that we were going to, and sometime last week we did max out. I believe the virtual attendance is open until the 7th for registration because there still needs some time to process those and give people their registrations to the Zooms and invites and all that stuff. So you can't go too late, but within a couple of days of the show. So if you still want to attend virtually, you can do that. It should be good. Looking forward to it. Going to be out in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Awesome. And if you're not in North Carolina and you happen to be in the New York City area, don't forget that the OWASP Gen AI Security Project is also putting on an Insecure Agents Hackathon on Tuesday. So quite literally, if you show up, you can bring an agent that you've already written, vibe coding or whatnot, doesn't matter. If you bring your agent that you've written, they're going to go through your agent with you and try and show you this is bad, this is bad, here's a bad practice, and
this is worse, this is the worst.
Yeah, they want to enumerate exactly where you went wrong and try and help you figure out how to make your your agent much more secure. If you don't bring an agent of your own, they're going to help you create one with bad practices. Okay, why would you do that? Well, because you can't really until you've made the mistakes, whether on purpose or not, you don't know how those mistakes are made, and you can't really learn from them.
Right.
So hopefully everybody walks out of there learning how to create much more secure agents. And with that, thank you all. I appreciate it. David, good to see you. Always a pleasure, Chase.
Good to be here.
Megazone.
Thanks so much.
I'll see you next week. So we'll be back. Thanks for checking out AppSec Now, a DevCentral podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And if so, please consider clicking like, subscribing, or even writing a review. Available on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube.